Hey everyone, Troy Hammond here, and that means you're back or you're first time listening to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. So if it's your first time, welcome aboard. If you've been back here before, thank you so much for coming back again. You're in for a treat this episode. We're chatting with Marian Johnson, who is the CEO of Ministry of Awesome. It's going to be a fun episode for me because I say the word awesome too much, and so I get to say it heaps on this podcast, and it is an awesome podcast. We're going to talk about everything that's happening in the Canterbury region here, how the MOA is helping and supporting this region, how they're connecting dots, and some of the ecosystem people that are popping out of it now, and talking about some of these founders that have started in this initial cohort are doing so well. And so it's a really cool episode. I'm really excited by what's happening in the Canterbury region here, and I hope you enjoy it.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning into the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
Funnily, this isn't the first time you and I have been on a podcast together, right?
No.
Yeah. It's hilarious. Hey, I'm on the other side now, though.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? No,
Yeah.
So that was my first real exposure to high growth startup. You know, that was one of the Fluent Scientific was one of the startups that came out of the Powerhouse experiment, which was one of the big tech incubators from Callahan, and it was here in Christchurch. I'm pretty sure they're still on they're definitely still in existence in Australia, but Fluent is still going, but. I was there doing that market validation piece and discovering exactly what problem our solution was going to fix.
Yeah.
And then from there was approached by Ministry of Awesome. So having gone through that really vulnerable period, pretty much everything that you could do wrong at a startup, we did.
Yeah.
And so that was very instructive for me.
They're the best lessons though, right? Because you learn so much more when you make a mistake.
Oh my God, yes.
It's like scar tissue on your brain that you never forget.
Yeah. And when people start using that same language that we as a team were using, I go, stop developing your product, right? Get off the code. Stop. Do not build the app, don't build that feature, because those are the mistakes that happen, right?
Yeah.
And they go on forever and everyone wastes their time and money and then it bombs.
How was it for you initially? Because, similar for me, right? I advise so many startups and founders and work closely with them, but I'm always, at that level where I'm above, and I get emotionally caught up in some of them, and to a degree, but you can't so much. And so how is it with you at Ministry of Awesome, being able to work with all these companies, but not involved so much anymore?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think because I'm the chief exec and because we've scaled and we've grown quite a lot over the last 5 years, I'm not on that front line talking to founders all the time, which is something that I really miss. But at the same time, it's a good thing because the people who are now doing that are way better than I am at, providing the kind of support that people need. My superpower and where I really fit in with founders is being able to see within my network what opportunities I might be able to develop for them. So, for example, if somebody is working in a B2C food and beverage space, I know exactly who to connect them with because of all the work that we've done around Food Starter with foodstuffs and Countdown and, custom manufacturing and the whole kind of supply equation. So I can connect them a whole lot easier and faster than they'd ever do that themselves because it takes time to discover a sector, right? It takes time to discover that network. So that's really where I get to roll in and go, okay, who can I, magically unlock a door for you? And the same thing's true with investors and, because we've had our ear to the ground for such a long time and they pretty much know everyone in the ecosystem. You're very much the same, I'm sure. And you can immediately make those connections and change and save so much time for a founder. The actual support and advice piece, of course, every once in a while I'll have a discussion with a founder, but we've got so much better people for that now. Yeah.
I feel the same with my team now. I have so many better people than me to have those conversations, but I love it. As a Ministry of Awesome then, like, can you give us a bit more of a backstory on who Ministry of Awesome are and why they were set up?
Sure. So Ministry of Awesome, we've been around now for 10 years, and we were actually created in the wake of the Christchurch earthquake. And so about a year after the earthquake, there was just so much red tape. Everything was so stalled. It was so frustrating. I was here. The city turned into a donut. Like there was the center, it was a hole, and everyone just kind of revolved around it and never went across. And it was a really difficult place to be. There was a major talent exit. People were sort of spinning the globe. If they weren't going to stay in New Zealand, where were they going to go? And a lot of people left. And the thing that we really needed as a city, and I remember at that time reading about Ministry of Awesome and thinking, I love it, was an organization that wasn't going to ask for permission and that was going to crystallize the shaping of Christchurch's future. And they did it in the most organic of ways. They created this event called Coffee and Jam, and a lot of other meetups, and everyone who wanted to turn up turned up. There was no like only these people could come, so we had mayors, we had politicians, we had central government people, we had just people who lived in Christchurch, we had students, we had high schoolers, everyone that you could possibly think of. There was no kind of invites. Just turn up if you feel like taking part in the conversation. And that created a lot of passion and kind of lighthouse projects for the city. And it was more of a hub for the future vision of Christchurch than any kind of stated activity that people were invited to. Although there were lots of other things happening at that time that kind of spun out of those meetups. So Ministry of Awesome was this organic post-earthquake group that represented a future, real positive vision for the city, breaking the mold, not asking for permission, cutting through red tape. And the people who originally began it are people like Kyla Colbin, who is the chief exec of BOMA. And how, she's just such a powerhouse. And Sam Johnson, who founded Student Volunteer Army, and Sasha McMeeking, who was the head of Māori Studies at the University of Canterbury, Vicky Buck, who was the deputy mayor, were the originals, and there's a photo of all of them in a cafe smiling, and I think they had just done their trust deed. So by the time I took over, which is 5 years ago, Christchurch was in a different space. So now the Economic Development Agency had pretty much crystallized, or was just about to crystallize, the vision for the city. And like every city in the universe right now, they decided that Christchurch was going to be the city of innovation, right? But like how many cities of innovation? But I say that in a kind of taking the mickey kind of way, but they actually followed up that vision with freaking execution and really clear goals, right? So they weren't just, we'll be the city of innovation and let's build some big glass tower and put a lot of like software engineers in there. They actually said, okay, in what? Specifically, in what?
And do you think, because it feels to me, so I'm an Aussie, I moved to New Zealand. I was debating moving to Christchurch when we first got here. My ex-wife's family were here, and so we're looking at Christchurch and Wellington. Wellington felt like more of Melbourne for me, and so we chose, that's where we chose Wellington. But it feels like to me, Christchurch pre-earthquake and post-earthquake feels like a completely different place to me.
Totally.
It feels vibrant, innovative. People are collaborating everywhere. It's exciting, and pre-earthquake. I mean, I didn't do too much business here, but it felt very... To do business here, you had to know someone, and you had to be mates with someone, and everyone was sort of related, and that's how things worked here. Now you just, I know of people that are just setting up in a cafe like Ministry of Awesome and just creating things all the time here now, and it feels like it embraces that innovative environment here now,
and is proud of it, and is starting to tell the story, right? And I think before you would have been. You would have been called a digital nomad, and you'd probably be here for 2 weeks and then head off to Bali. You know what I mean? But Absolutely.
You
I
can't go to
think
Bali
there's
anymore. The Bali's, everything's changing in Bali now. So the government's come down pretty hard on all the digital nomads that are ruining Bali. And so, you can't rent an Airbnb anymore. You have to stay in a hotel and all these new rules. But my question to you was, do you think the earthquake was like a reset for Christchurch to say, okay, let's redesign what we want Christchurch to be in terms of technology and innovation here now, and that places like Ministry of Awesome, almost like operating like within a startup, like themselves, like paved that way now?
I totally see that. I mean, that's exactly the story, right?
Yeah.
That's the story I'm always telling, and it's very real. The difference between before and after is really stark for me. So I came to New Zealand because one night when I was living in London, I'd been there for, I think, 7 years at that stage. I was working at Universal Studios. Yeah. My whole background's media and film and gaming and that whole malarkey. And so one night I went out in Shoreditch to a place called the Dragon Bar, and I met this really cool Kiwi guy, and we fell in love, and then we got married. And then as soon as I got pregnant, like all good Kiwis, he was like, we need to get the hell out of Dodge, and brought me home to Christchurch. And because my dad was an American diplomat, I wasn't like, it's not like I had to be in London or I had to be in the States. I didn't miss any home. I was fine to just rock along and go to Christchurch and check it out. But I remember getting here and thinking, oh my gosh, it's like Mars. Because it's so far away. Yeah. That's the first thing. It's so far away. It felt really unconnected to everything that I knew. My industry wasn't here. Yeah. It wasn't even close. It probably wasn't even in Auckland. The whole city felt very much fueled by primary industry, construction, some manufacturing, services, lots of small entrepreneurs. And it's really hard to believe that even at that time, we still had the second largest tech sector in New Zealand. But it was a city where I said to my husband at that time, he's still my husband. I don't mean he was my husband at that time. I said to him, 2 years, darling, like 2 years. And after that, we will head to New York or back to London, or I don't know, we'll spin the globe and see where to go.
I said that too. I said 12 months. 16 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. 16 years ago. Yeah, we're twinned on our anniversary.
What is it about Kiwis that are able to drag their partners back here? Like, I don't know any other country where people were like, I meet someone and I'm like, what are you doing here? I don't know, I just got dragged here, but I kind of love it now,
But that's really cool, though, isn't it?
It is.
Like, I think it's an unofficial immigration strategy, because Kiwis are pretty good looking and they go overseas and they snap up, people pretty easily. And they've got this really neat little, I don't know, adventurous attitude, but they're also quite mellow. I mean, I hate to generalize about an entire nation. I mean, they're just attractive people, right? And not just superficially, but in many different ways. And then, but I also think it takes a certain person who is willing to take chances. So someone who is, okay, I'm fine with risk, and I am fine with risk. That's why I've chosen.
Where was home for you in the States?
Nowhere really. I guess before I left to go to London and Budapest, I was in New York. And that's where I went after I graduated from university. So I went to school in Boston at Tufts, and then went to New York like half of my graduating class. And that's when I broke into media. And then I went to Budapest and launched a TV station. And then I went to London and worked at Universal and other media outlets, and then met the hot Kiwi guy and came to New Zealand.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, definitely unofficial like immigration strategy for New Zealand. I love it.
Most certainly. Yeah, but it says something about you too. Like,
I was willing to move here.
Absolutely. Your average person, would they really just pack up their life and go?
Yeah.
I mean, remember at that time, 15 years ago, the world wasn't as like freaky geopolitically, Trump was just, some dude on a stupid show.
I was working with 8i, this virtual reality company, if you know of them, when Trump got elected. And I remember the night I was with a whole bunch of Americans in the Wellington office, and we were watching it, and people just crying. And I remember, it feels like a earthquake moment, right? Pre and post, Trump. But anyway.
Everyone remembers where they were. All Americans will remember where they were. Some Americans don't have that sinking feeling, but I remember being across the road. I was at Fluent Scientific at the time, and there was a guy there who, for some reason, loved Trump. He was Kiwi, and it just made me wild. He'd start talking about it, and I'd have to leave the room. And and anyway, I remember being across the road at C4. And when the results were coming in, it was in the afternoon. And at that stage, we were starting to see the trends, right? Do you remember the New York Times had this monitor?
Yeah.
And it started off that Hillary was the winner.
Yeah.
And then it slowly kind of swung round to Trump. And I kept refreshing my phone thinking the stupid thing is broken, like hitting the dials, basically trying to like snap the glass with my finger to say this is obviously broken.
It was like watching a movie. It was surreal. And I actually felt the same emotions watching Succession in the TV show again. When the election, I won't any spoilers for people watching it, but the election moment, and when they were doing that, I was like, oh, those feelings are coming back. But
so hard to watch. That was so hard to watch. And the worst thing of all is it's kind of like, what was that show that Kevin Spacey was in with, where he was the senator?
Yeah.
And at first, it was really fun.
Show. What was that show, Jono? You must know that.
I can't remember, but anyway, when you first watched it, it was really good because it was crazy. Like, no way politics is like that. And then Trump won, and Martin and I, my husband, were like, right, turn that off. Yeah. This is for real.
Well, that was actually modeled on the original UK TV show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, great show.
It was a great show until it became real.
Yeah, indeed. So, hey, I'm interested to sort of dig into your experience working globally, right? Because you've got some thoughts on Kiwis needing to think bigger and the likes, and so that probably comes from your experience of working internationally around the world. What was Budapest like?
Budapest was wild. Budapest was really wild. I got my role when I was still in London because the company that bought a TV license in Budapest, and I helped them write the listing, all the listing documents, and what the marketing, just basically the path to domination, and it was bought by an investment banker called Peter Klenner, German investment banker, and he offered me the role of director of sales and marketing at what was called A3 Televizio in Budapest.
Yeah.
And so I packed up my New York apartment and I got my little beagle Molly and popped her in a little travel case and stuck her in the bottom of a Molev and flew to Budapest and landed in Budapest. And you know what? That it was insane. I remember turning up in the first day at work, going up to Buda, which is where the office was. No one was there. It was locked. The front door was locked. I knocked on the door. Some guy came along, this lovely guy called, it turns out his name is Imre Kovacs. Everyone says their names backwards, so they say Kovac Imre, so last name first. So I met Imre, and Imre was like, who are you? And I said, I'm the head of sales and marketing. Like, zero fanfare. No one knew I was about to come. So it started exactly as it went on. Like total mayhem, total chaos.
And you early, or was just no one working at that?
No one was working at that time. Yeah, they came in later. And
this is like an Emily in Paris episode.
It is, but even worse. Like that level of resentment and contempt and who the hell do you think you are, American, turning up here on our patch, running our TV station? I did a deal with this guy called Justin Bodel from Power TV, who was in London. He was amazing. He really helped me program the station. We introduced Benny Hill to... to the Hungarians. It was insane. The amount of the shenanigans, the difficulty to commercialize, there was State Television 1, State Television 2, and they were commercializing, right? But there were all of the people who had been part of the previous regime were still there, and they just now had access to vast pots of profit. And so there was a lot of looking after each other. A lot of, I mean, everything was a backroom deal. Absolutely everything.
So Budapest at the moment is the place that a lot of people move to now to get entry into the EU because it's so easy to get a visa there compared to other places.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends went there to set up to go to Europe, but have now got tech companies in Budapest, and it's turning into like a bit of a tech hub now with startups. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. No one needs to show Hungarians how to commercialize these days.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, at that time, that was very, 10 years after everything started to change. And so it was very much, it was rough. It was very rough. But now it's this incredible European capital that you could probably set up your business quite easily there. But at the time, that was simply not the case.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've always been a bit of a glutton for innovation and hard, like jumping into the deep end.
Yeah.
And is that something that throughout your whole life? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, I do like setting up something new and making it fly. That's my sweet spot. It was really hard at Universal to be part of a much larger organization, and even there, I was kind of sifting around to try to find where my spot was, where I could do something kind of new, and created this little group that basically focused on pulling all of the assets of Universal together around commercial partnership. So, in other words, if you were like Samsung, you could take advantage of a movie launch, the soundtrack, the game, the premiere at the cinema, all in one go. Some merchandising and some licensing. All of these are different divisions within this giant corporation that never really spoke to each other. So that kind of work was heaps of fun. That's kind of like, doing a puzzle.
Yeah. Those like media buying and advertising and campaigns and everything across like one TV ad now transcends into, TV shows and games now and this and the likes.
Yeah.
It's so interesting now how everything's sort of connected, in terms of advertising and buying now.
Totally. I mean, it's 360. You can't not see it, right? You're just surrounded, and you don't like that whole. What it used to be, reach, frequency, opportunities to see, right? And now it's just about your whole world is wallpapered with brands.
Yeah.
You don't know where you first saw it.
Yeah.
You don't know when it hit your, consciousness.
Yeah. Or if you're talking about it now, you see it in your Instagram feed pretty much straight away. Yeah. Hey,
Well, that's something else, isn't it?
Yeah, it is creepy. Yeah. I watched that Netflix show the other night. Joan is awful. Have you seen that? No, it's on, what's the TV show? Do you know that one, Jono? Black Mirror. It's Black Mirror. Ooh. And there's an episode, Joan is awful. You should watch it. It's creepy and weird. And that show, Black Mirror
freaks me out.
Yeah, it's too close.
I left at the one where the prime minister had to,
entertain a pig.
Yeah. That one was just like, God.
I think that was the first episode. So they start pretty strong.
No, I've seen at least 3 or 4, but I did see that one and have never forgotten it because, who came up with that? Who came up with that?
I often watch that show and I think, are they just sitting in a room on acid on a beanbag?
It feels like it. It feels like it, and darkly. I don't want to be on that trip, to be honest.
Yeah, but all the big stars are going on it now. They love it.
I know. Okay, I'll go back. I'll go back. I'll try to sift through the darkness and try and find something a little bit more my speed. Yeah,
all the American actors are coming on it now, like on the British shows. So on Americans, how's your accent traveled around the world? Do you get, as an American, do you think that you get credibility or critique when people first hear your accent? Or is it a bit of both?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think that, in terms of professionalism, I think, in terms of career, I think it's probably a positive. If there's something happening in the subconscious, it's not automatically, ooh, she's a moron, but more like a recognition that, okay, she's probably up to speed. She's been in a larger market. Yeah. She has some vaguely large market experience. I don't know whether it does us favors or not.
It's funny because I always talk to people, and the reason why I set up this podcast is because I wanted to hear from New Zealand heroes, right? Like in the industry, and I think we've got so many amazing people in our ecosystem that I wanted to get their voices out, and not to. I was just listening to a lot of American podcasts, you know, and Americans are so good, you know, at orating and talking their game and selling themselves and the likes. Kiwis aren't as good, and so I think, you know, for me, so many Kiwis that I speak to, they're just like. Americans, they just know they just must know everything, and so I've always been curious as an American. When you come into the market, do you, by association, use your experience at scale or whatever it is to just get yourself into opportunities or not? But
I don't think so. I think the only accent that has that kind of door opening powers that. And it really depends on who you are, is the English accent. Like I always say to English people and say to Kiwis, go to the States. People will love you automatically. Yeah. You have an accent they love, right? And they don't love all accents, but they do love those accents. Yeah. And they won't notice whether or not you're Kiwi or Australian, but nonetheless, both come with charm and interest and... You know, at least you've got this veneer of cool that you may or may not be, but you've got it automatically because of your accent.
I had that in bars in San Francisco. People would just say, just talk.
For sure.
Yeah, it was interesting.
For sure.
You know, the thing I love about New Zealand and the New Zealand-Australia relationship now is whenever I travel the States now and say New Zealand, everyone knows New Zealand. Like it's New Zealand Inc. is just batting on a global stage so well now. When I first went to the States 20-something years ago, I would say Australia and New Zealand. My partner was from New Zealand, and they'd say, "Oh, is New Zealand a state of Australia?" You know, but now it's like, New Zealand is world famous, and you know, it is so cool to see that.
I love it. I love it, and I'm so proud. I mean, you guys let me in. I'm Kiwi now, right? Yeah. And I'm really. I mean, through the COVID experience, it was. I definitely had. I'm going to kill this word. Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
I definitely had a bit of that because on one hand, every Sunday I was on the phone with my friends in New York, all of my friends at Tufts. We all went to Paris together our junior year, and those are my best mates, and they're all kind of scattered across New York, East Coast. And so we had a call every Sunday when they were all in lockdown and people were dying left, right, and center. I mean, one of my friends, Mio, was a doctor and she was going through remember that? Do you remember that?
I had clients in New York.
The holes being dug in, I can't remember what harbor, but anyway, through that, I felt terrible that I wasn't suffering alongside. And on the other hand, I felt proud. Not for me, but proud for New Zealand that we had, a government and a people who stepped up and did all the right things at that time. And what I really appreciated was it gave the Americans hope that there is a way through this.
Yeah.
And it gave them hope that not everywhere in this world is effed.
Yeah,
you know, and I know they felt that, and it wasn't like they were thinking as soon as we get through this, I'm emigrating. You know, it was more like somewhere out there is not madness.
Yeah,
there's
I think the government handled it awesomely, and so segueing into awesome, right? So getting back to Ministry of Awesome, tell me through so what now? Talk me through. What do the next couple of years look like, and how are you helping shape the sort of Christchurch scene here now going forward?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if we just start off with, I was saying that post-earthquake, we had an economic development agency that really had clarity around specific focus, specific goals, and what the measurements were going to be around achieving them. So they weren't just painting some crazy thing in the sky and saying that's where we're heading and then putting nothing behind it in terms of execution. They fixed on 3 very specific categories, and those were aerospace and future transport, med tech and health tech, future food and fiber. And it was at that stage that I approached the Economic Development Agency, I was brand new at MOA, And the EDA CEO was also brand new, and the whole kind of strategy was brand new around these, what they were calling at the time, super nodes, and we're now calling them clusters. And said, look, we have a great tech sector, but we do not have a great startup ecosystem. And if you want this to be the city of innovation, if you want to be hitting these 3 categories, we need a startup ecosystem, because right now, anyone who has that incredible ambition in these areas, or even incredible global ambition full stop, is going to where they can get the community and support they need to succeed. And that is, if they're going to stay in New Zealand, it's Auckland, Wellington. Auckland had Ice House, Wellington had Creative HQ. Or they're going to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Tel Aviv, to Singapore, where they, or, obviously the Valley, New York, London, going somewhere where that community exists. Right now, it does not exist. And if it does, we can't see it because everyone's working their bedroom somewhere, or like there's one person at Biz Dojo over here and one person over here. And they're not collaborating. They're not seeing each other. And they wholeheartedly agreed. And at the time, we at that very stage also then made a partnership arrangement with Auto Institute of Canterbury, because we also knew we needed pipeline to come through. So that talent pipeline of 7,000 Central City students, and then creating a sort of geographical focal point, which was Te Ōhaka, which is called the Nest, and that's the startup hub in the city center where Ministry of Awesome is HQ'd. And we just opened the doors and said, hey, look, if you're a high growth startup with growth ambition, come and chat to us, come sit here, let's create a community. And one by one, they started to turn up, and literally we opened the doors on day 1, and we had 5 founders there. One was Emily Blythe from Piper Vision, the fog dispersal technology. She's an incredible founder.
Up for a High Tech Award tomorrow night.
And just won the Kiwi Innovator of the Year. And then next up we had Kyla from BOMA, who now was on the board of Ministry of Awesome, but now was creating this whole brand new organization that was about ensuring transformation of organizations around focusing on innovation. And then we had Levi turn up from Partly, which at that time was called All Goods. We had Chris Bacon turn up from Komodo, Chris and Jack from Komodo, and we had a whole handful of others who then just one by one joined in. The whole thing snowballed so fast, it was incredible. All you had to do was say, here, this is your place. And at the time, we didn't do any kind of business support we didn't do any venture support program, but it also became the place where investors would turn up, where government would turn up, where students would turn up, and all of a sudden you have exactly what you need in terms of those key ingredients. You've got your founders, you've got your supportive startup community, you've got talent to work at these startups and to do their final year projects there, and then maybe become early hires. You've got investors casting around trying to find good investments in the South Island. You've got your academics and research projects that are also happening alongside those startups. Research projects like helping develop that hydroscopic powder that Emily then went on with, like creating the dispersal mechanism, which began as a leaf blower at Te Ōhaka and is now this like incredible drone. So putting all that together and then literally squishing it up and shutting the door and then kind of stirring it is really like, it was the perfect cocktail shaker for startup.
If you build it, they will come, right? Like,
totally.
And it's so cool
Tell
to
the
see.
story, right?
Yeah.
Tell the story. And then it attracts. And then before you know it, we had 30 high growth startups in the space, and we had investors doing office hours every week. And suddenly it was on the map.
And so what are you doing? Like one thing so Serge Van Dam and I chat about this a lot often, right? Is like, how do we change the education system to be able to help support these companies setting up? How does what Ministry of Awesome doing like tie into the tertiary, education system?
Well, So we have a program called Springboard that we have with Aotearoa Institute, and most of the students are drawn from their engineering program, their ICT program, which means software engineers and developers, and some of those students are drawn from their business program, and all of those students have the opportunity to do their final year project, which is either a third year project, and it means that they do their paper at Te Ōhaka while alongside a startup. So in the case of Hypervision, one of the pieces of project work would have been the development of that dispersal mechanism. And in the case of another startup who is quite incredible and just took, I think, Innovation of the Year at Field Days, is Nadia Scartosi, the founder of eClean EnviroWaste, which is a bioreactor that removes nitrates from water. I mean, every single employee she's had has been an Aotearoa student who started off as a final year project around what they're doing. So this is about talent before it goes out into the great wide world, and it's about applied learning, and it's about understanding what the startup environment represents as a potential career path. I mean, it's not for everyone, but when you have...
But that exposure is fantastic.
Absolutely, because if you're working at a startup, you're not making anyone's flipping coffee, that's for sure. You're not working on one tiny little piece of a feature at some major, software company. You're probably writing the marketing plan. You're probably, building the actual product, and there's no one else doing it. And so that is just, it's lightning in a bottle for those students. And there are so many examples of students who then get bit by that bug, and then they really want to be startup operators too. Whereas other organizations, they might go to Datacom, or they might go get a job at Jade, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that from the perspective, they've got options. They can see. And then what happens when you are a startup operator, and especially in those really early days where you have exposure to the original innovators, then you actually think, maybe I could do this too, right? Maybe I could do this too. Look at Peter Beck's impact on that crew at Rocket Lab, and look at how many other startups they've spawned. It's no accident that Levi came out of that. I mean, Levi is an incredible guy, and he didn't need Peter Beck or his experience at Rocket Lab to make him an incredible guy. He would have done something incredible anyway. But that ability to work alongside someone who was that ambitious, who was that innovation minded, and who knew what to do, how to do, and he learned at the foot of someone like that, who continues to be a major mentor for him.
I'm really keen to talk to you about that. That was something that I had written down, is like the Peter Becks and the Rod Drury's and the likes, and the people that just have this aggressive, think big nature, right? And something that I've read from you in a few articles is that Kiwis don't think big enough, and so that's like when you talk about the Levi's and is it Will from Halter or whatever his name is? I forgot his name. That spin out of that, right? They have this aggressive, think big attitude. Why is it Kiwis, you think a bit too small?
Not all
Kiwis, obviously, but
Gosh, I don't even know. I read this book, which is really well worth reading, called Ambition, and it focuses on Kiwis and ambition. And there's actually a full study, and it was given to me by Imsha and Alex. Imsha from Outset, and Alex, who was at, I think, Hill Ference. They're very curious around this piece as well. The book is well worth reading. There's a lot of data in it, and it talks about a culture change that's required. And I think this is just my 2 cents, right? Obviously, I'm an American. I was I was born in Bangladesh. I grew up overseas, but every 2 years I came home and lived somewhere near Washington, D.C. We Americanized again, and then we'd go fly out to Kuwait or wherever the heck we were going.
Your dad was,
but my mom and dad were obviously American.
Yeah.
And the schools I went to were American schools. And every time I came home to America, I would go to an American school, obviously. Yeah. And here's one thing that is really, really different straight off the bat. We are so comfortable with calling attention to ourselves.
Yeah.
In fact, it is a necessary piece of development that we go through as Americans.
How do you go through that though? Like, is it just by default? You're
in a classroom, third grade. I'm in Fairfax County. I'm in third grade. I've just come back from, I can't remember where, right? And I'm sitting there and the teacher says, okay, here's an equation. Who knows the answer to the question? Everyone in that freaking class raises their hand and like, I do. You did the same thing in New Zealand. I'm telling you, only
you'd get like your finger like just slightly pointed, and Australia was a little bit similar, right?
Yeah.
Like Australia is definitely attention seeking as well. And, like you're told, be the best at whatever you do, don't do it,
100%.
Yeah. And so
we're the best. We're the best. I mean, how many times do you hear that in speeches, and then unfortunately they get broadcast around the world and everyone's like, Jesus, shut up.
Yeah.
But
there's something in it, right?
It's the best. We're the best. We're the best. We're the best. You're the best. You have to be the best. And it's just a full on, this is your natural path, right? It's like, if you weren't, you'd be really ashamed,
How do you know, as your role of CEO at Ministry of Awesome, how do you know if you're being the best? Like, how do you measure your impact?
Well, I think that's one thing that we did really early on, and I took a note basically from the guy at Christchurch NZ who was our stakeholder, and he said, you're doing all these startup activation sessions, whatever those are. How many startups, and all we were doing was counting how many people we met with, and not tracking what the impact was. And quite honestly, in those very early days, it was really more about having a place where people could collect.
You're building the foundation,
We're
right?
building the foundation. It's super early days. But now if you go to our website, if you go to the MOA website, it has 3 figures in the corner. The first one is how many startups we've worked with since May 2019, which is when we really we grabbed the bull by the horns, opened the hub, had the partnership with AUTA, had the partnership with Christchurch NZ. So how many startups have we worked with? How much capital have they raised? And how many full-time jobs has it created? And at this stage, we've raised a little over 80 million. And that number obviously keeps ticking up and we need to update it. Jeffrey will probably put the figures and give it to our digital marketing coordinator, Anjali, sometime next week. And that figure is going to go up by another 1.5 to 2. And because someone's just raised. And then in terms of the number of employees, we track that every week, every month. And that number, obviously, it goes up and it goes down. And right now we're just under 300. Awesome. And so that's impact, right? That's why an EDA is going to invest in what we do. That's why Callahan Innovation, is confident in selecting Ministry of Awesome to deliver startup services. This is why we're in it, right? Yeah. We're not here to do innovation theater, right? Yeah. At the end of every accelerator, at the end of every incubator, we do a count up, and then we continue to track because it may not happen immediately. We work, to be absolutely truthful, we work so early, and that's the other thing I think that holds us apart. Creative HQ is also really early stage, and this is a critical piece. If we don't have that early stage volume coming through, we're not going to have the startup numbers that we need in order to be this glorious, future focused New Zealand that everybody is imagining. And to me, it really is at this stage, the early stage piece and the activity around that early stage piece and that absolute pipelining and that focus on that pipeline is critical. Yep. And there's 3 things that are going to drive that. That's role modeling, so telling stories. Hey, look at this person. Hey, look at that person. That makes other people go,
oh, I can do that.
I can do that. Or, and then the second one is the community building. Where do I go? Where do I see all these other people? And then the third piece is making sure that we bring support and light a fire underneath all of those people who have a glimmer of gold talent to them. Sorry. And then the fourth thing is one thing that we haven't been that successful with, but we are working on big time, is bringing our medium to large corporates and organizations in behind the startup ecosystem. We need those organizations to see our startups and our innovators as external innovation engines. Do not invest in your own internal innovation program and staff it with somebody who went and did some innovation course somewhere. Within your corporate, it ain't going to work. Actually, avail yourselves of the grassroots that's already all around you here in New Zealand.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. The other thing that I think that I've noticed in Christchurch, 15 years ago to now, is there's so many more female founders here now in Christchurch. And is that something, I know that's something that you're particularly passionate about, is getting more and more female founders.
Yeah.
Is that something that's been worked on here, or is it just by default?
Totally. About? I mean, it's a major focus for Ministry of Awesome. And we started it, I don't know if you remember Tip Pyamsum-Boon, who used to be, I think she was I don't know if she was a GP or an investment manager at Blackbird Ventures. She and Sam were extremely bullshy about women founders and making sure that we had really strong participation in this market. And it's something that I think that they worked on an awful lot back in Australia as well. Anyway, Tip was coming to Christchurch. This is 3 years ago. Tip was coming to Christchurch one day, and she said, hey, let's do a breakfast of all your women founders. And I'm on the phone with her, and I'm looking across the room, and I'm like, oh, Emily, nutty, eh? And I just thought, how the hell did this happen? I'm a woman. I just assumed we were there, right? I just assumed. But we didn't have a decent percentage of women founders across the incubator. And we didn't have a decent percentage of women taking part in our accelerators. And this is not a Christchurch question. I mean, we work across all of the country now. Most of, like, half of our accelerators, well, more like 3/4 of our accelerators are women all around New Zealand and startups all around New Zealand. So this is something that just happened all by itself, and it's a pipeline issue. And so therefore, off the back of that, I said to Tip, we need to do something. We need to start off with, like, let's do a thunderclap for women founders in New Zealand. And that was Electrify Aotearoa, which is a Women Founder Summit. It took place for the first time on the 26th of May last year here in Christchurch. And I was absolutely gobsmacked and delighted that more than half of the audience came from outside of Christchurch. So we had mostly Auckland, Wellington, and then a whole heap of people from Hamilton and Tauranga and Invercargill and Gore and Dunedin. But it was just fantastic. The vibe on the day was incredible. The founders who spoke were incredible. It was just such a great event. And the purpose of it was inspiration by showing all of the attendees what it could look like in those early stages. So there was no rock stars up on stage. They were all people who were still kind of pre-Series A. Well, hang on. No, there was Sharesies. So that's definitely post. And what was possible. And everybody who spoke stuck around and shared. And it was, 500 women founders from across the country. And
what can you share from that, right? So if you were to summarize that and say, talking to women right now who might have an idea but might be too scared or might not know what to do or want to get in the industry but not sure, like, how could you summarize that conference and say?
I think the number one thing is that it showed that there was a real community, but the community hadn't connected yet. And so therefore, the minute you create that community and you can all see each other, you can get on each other's wing, and then you can break out into your little regions and you know who these people are. You suddenly have, 10, 12 peers who are going through the same dramas that you are. I think it's so important. You know, founders helping founders is the number one benefit of probably everything we do. 100%. For sure, the master classes are great, and for sure, the office hours are great, and for sure, you know, Jeffrey and Zach and Ben and Katie and Anjali and all of our mentors and commercialization benches are great, but absolutely nothing beats someone like Nathan Taylor from Partly having a meeting with you and talking to you about your pitch.
Yeah,
you know, or sharing their IM or their capital raising strategy or whatever, because they've been there, done that. Anyone else is just talking from the cloud.
Yeah,
you know.
Hey, that sounds really awesome. Is that something that you're going to do like annually now?
Absolutely. So Electrify Aotearoa is something that happens every year, and our plan is that we move from city to city. So we started in Christchurch. That was last year. This year, we're on the 1st of August at Sky City, and we have a full, incredible day of learning, of networking, of capability building. So that inspiration piece and that community piece and the capability piece is going to be insane. We expect another 500 women to turn up, women and men, because we need allies as well. And then next year it's going to be in Wellington. The date is TBC, but it's about 12 months. Every 12 months we'll do it again.
Awesome. All right, we'll get in touch if you need some sponsorship and the likes when you get to Wellington. That's my town there. And so we'll pop the link down below so people can go off and grab a ticket and join you. It's so hard, right, when you're an innovator and you've got an idea and you start socializing it with your family and friends. So many people tell you, no, don't do it, because they're worried and scared for you that you might get hurt and fall. And so to be able to surround yourself with people who also take risk and think big, you know, is such a critical thing to do.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And we're really generous in this country. You know, our startup ecosystem, I think, is at that stage where that generosity is there. But I think people are also really still scared to ask for favors, scared to ask for intros, scared to ask for advice. And that's why I think it's so important that you build those communities that are safe spaces, and that freak out around those, that resistance around that, the fear is dissipated because you build a relationship and it's a give and take. Yeah.
What are you going to look back at in 5 years and to say, oh, I'm proud of this? Is there anything happening right now that you're like, I'm excited about this?
I'm already really proud of the impact that Ministry of Awesome has had on our startup environment, not just in Christchurch, but certainly we can point to that immediately.
I think people from around the country point to Ministry of Awesome. Like everywhere I go now, like it's funny you reference Ice House, you know, Creative HQ, and then sort of, you know, Ministry of Awesome here, because that's like when I was in Auckland the other week, they were saying, oh, we wish we had something like Ministry of Awesome, you know, and Wellington and the likes. And so I think it's definitely put New Zealand startups on the map here in Christchurch, and I think it's doing really, really good things.
That's really kind of you to say. And I mean, we've been working really hard, but I know the Ice House team is working really hard, and I know the Creative HQ has been busting their butt for, like 10 years now, and they are the beginning of the movement, right? And each of us have a really important role to play. Our relationship with Creative HQ and with Ice House is 1,000% collegial, collaborative. You know, I speak to them.
We all need each other, right?
No, it's not. The pie is big and getting bigger, right? And the more we can work together, the better. One of the number one things that, you know, I don't know if you know, Troy, there's this group called the Startup Council, which was created. Essentially, it was a recommendation from a small working group that originated at MB, and the contributors to it were Suze from Angel Association New Zealand, Dave Moskowitz from Gen, Marcel van den Assem, who is, you know, obviously so involved with startup and with the NZGCP board, and JD.
JD Trask.
JD Trask. And JD was awesome because he was the founder in the room. Like, hello, we need a founder in the room. And he was super clear on exactly what the breaks were for him, like what was screwing up his ability to grow as far as like policies and
he's very vocal.
And he's very vocal. He did not worry at all about offending anyone. And
I don't think he has that ability.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I'm going to make him an honorary American Anyway, so we had this conversation with each other and MB, and we recommended that that we create a working group called the Startup Council, and the job to be done was we wanted a startup minister. We want a minister for startups, someone who has that portfolio, who can then pull together all the tiny little espresso cups of activity and funding from every ministry there is, from education through to, the IRD, all government groups, to have all of their policies, strategy, thinking, come into a central space and be tested against, is this what our high growth startups and innovators need, so that we can maximize the impact of the slim wallet that we are deploying against this incredible opportunity for our country. We have so many talented founders and innovators. We have so many incredible researchers working to develop and try to commercialize, but with all of the disparate policies and none of it being held together and collaborated, and coordinated, it's just little drops in the ocean.
Do you think we'll have a minister of startups anytime soon?
That's the recommendation. I mean, there's a whole recommendation that's being written, but the overriding idea is that we need to, the whole point of the Startup Council was to say, okay, look, if we look at this as a big picture and a coordination job that needs to be done, where there's somebody who owns that whole portfolio, then we can do something really exciting in the space. So you'll hear more about that over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, awesome. I'd love to see that. That'd be fantastic. I'll recruit that role for free, if need be, just because it'll be such a great role for New Zealand. And so, hey, this has been a really fun chat. And I'm not sure if you've been listening to any of the new season 2, but we sort of we finished on a final question now, which is just a little bit of an information share from you. And so you've already referenced a book that people are going to go off and read. But if you were to sort of say, hey, I'm going to pop something down in the show notes, and it could be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be a talk, it could be, a course that you talk, it could be something that you just think, this was really impactful for me and I want to share it with people. What's that one thing that you would sort of share on?
I'd do 2 if I can.
Go for it.
And everyone has read this, I think, and if you haven't read it, you better flipping read it. It's so good. The Hard Thing About Very Hard Things, or The Very Hard Thing About All Hard Things. I can't remember exactly.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things is one of the best books around startup I have ever read. I flipping love it. And I pick it up and open it all the time.
And especially in this market when you're making some hard decisions, right? And so,
And it, you know what? It mellows you out. Right? You'll read it and you'll be like, yeah, shoot. I'm not the only person who's gone down this road. Oh my gosh, there are thousands before me, and look at their scars. And oh my God, my situation is half as bad as that.
It puts it into perspective.
Puts everything into perspective, and it's very instructive. The second thing that I would really like to talk about, and honestly, I have absolutely nothing to do with this organization, but I cannot applaud enough the Abroad.io program, which is a founder development program, and I was lucky enough to be part of it last year. And it was, I believe it was supported by Callahan Innovation, potentially MB as well, and the Angel Association of New Zealand. And so I was fortunate enough to go through that program. It's run by a guy called Justin Milano. And it is essentially all about how to build, your best operating system. This is being an entrepreneur, being a startup founder, has got to be the hardest job in the whole wide world. I'm not one, but I see them every single day. And I just think, my God, it is so taxing. You never leave it. It's there when you wake up in the morning. It's there when you're having dinner with your family. It's there when you're at the gym. It's
in your dreams when you're sleeping.
It's in your dreams. It's like just omnipresent, filters everything. You start to see your whole world, your identity, everything is battened up inside this, and it sucks your lifeblood, and so something that allows you to deal with that, and to build your resilience muscle. I know that's such an overused word these days, but it's so important, right? You have to be able to deal with the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs and the sleepless nights and the concern and the worry, the anxiety, the family, the lack of balance, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think it was such a useful program because it's not like, just constantly talking about your emotions or anything like that. It's toolkits. It's also helps you with your own management of your team, how to run a good meeting. There's some practical stuff, and then there's some really good internal work that you do. I would recommend any founder to go through that program.
Awesome. All right. We're going to check bensbookandabroad.io down below, and people can go and check it out.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you get on. It sounds like you've got a lot of work to do still in your hands. And so I'm excited thank you for everything that you've done and you're doing and your whole team. And it's so cool to come to Christchurch. And it's so awesome to be able to see what's happening down here and just feel the vibe as soon as you get in. It feels like, and the minute you walk off the plane, right? You go through the tunnels and they're cool at Air New Zealand. You see all the constellations and the likes, and you just feel like you're in a cool, fun place the minute you get off the plane. So
awesome.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope everyone is actually voting and vying now for this Minister of Startups, because that needs to be a thing. It needs to be a thing tomorrow, and we all need to get behind and support this. And so I would love you to go below and comment on who you think should be our new Minister of Startups. It definitely shouldn't be me. It should be someone with credible and great experience and someone who doesn't just know how to talk shit on a podcast. And so that was a fantastic podcast. Really loved chatting with Marian. She's doing awesome things. It's only fitting that she's at the Ministry of Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you so much to everyone that are watching these podcasts now. It is blowing my mind about how many people are watching these, and I'm really appreciative of all the feedback that people keep sending me. I may not get a chance to reply to all your messages, but I just want to say thank you for sending them. I see them. I am delighted by anyone that takes their time out of their day to send something like that. And so now's the time to jump on, share this podcast with anyone that you think needs it, like and support and follow and subscribe to all the things. Jump on our YouTube channel. We're trying to build that out now, and give us a follow on there, and all the other podcast platforms. And so from Jono and Troy in Christchurch, it's been a blast. Until next time.
This podcast is produced by Te Ōhaka from Empire Films.